Rev up your engines!
All right, the police are raiding Toyota factories. Believe it or not, this is happening in Japan. Now, especially in their K car factories. They make those little cars. We don't get them here in the United States, but they like them in Asia because they like tiny things. The company's car wing has been forging crash test results and have other irregularities in horsepower ratings and pollution ratings for diesels. Well, now the police are raiding them in Japan. As the news stated, Japanese transport officials raided a Toyota-affiliated plant Tuesday after the company admitted to cheating on engine testing. Toyota, as they said, he apologized, bowing deeply. Hey, wait a second. He got caught and he just bowed. I mean, back in the day, they'd commit hara-kiri, right? When they were shamed. Now they don't do that anymore. All you get from them now is a bow, right? What a lot of people don't understand is in Asia, there's a lot of lack of regulations. I mean, they had banking failures over the past few decades, and then they found out, geez, nobody's even checking this stuff. They just believe what they tell them, you know? And in this case, they were cheating like mad because, of course, they're the biggest car manufacturer in the world, and especially in Japan. They're humongous. They just let them run roughshod for a while, and now they get caught, and the cops are raiding the Toyota plants to get information to see what actually happened. I find it hilarious. Well, Ford has thousands of Mustang Mach-E's piling up in the dealer lots, and Ford wants them gone because it looks bad. And here's something that really kind of makes me furious. How they lie about their sales figures. Ford Motor Company counts their vehicles as sold when they make them and they ship them to the dealership because technically they sold them to the Ford dealership and they count them as sold. People haven't bought them yet, right? The same thing, I knew they did this, is that when they lease cars, they also count them as sold. Now, they're just leasing them, they're not sold, right? But they count them as cars that were sold to make their figures look inflated and bigger than they actually are. The other day I was wondering, they got all these unsold vehicles all over the place. How can they say that they're losing money on these vehicles when they have these high sales volumes? Well, that's just because they're counting them as sold when they go to the dealership. A dealership is an independent entity. And what a lot of people don't know is most of them don't own the cars on the lot. They have a gigantic loan for every car on the lot that's new, right? Until they're sold, the dealership is just like you. Once a month, they got to pay the note on each car they have, right? Do they want them lying around? Of course they don't want them lying around. Now, Ford's thinking of all kinds of things. Let's rent them out. We'll rent out the electric vehicles. Anything we can do, lease them, rent them out. It all comes down to is people don't want these stupid cars, and now it's biting them in the rear end, and reality's coming out because these sale figures that you're seeing of electric cars, they're counting it as sold when it goes to the dealership. That's why the dealerships are telling them, don't send us any more of these electric vehicles. We can't even sell the ones we have. But of course, Ford wants to push them on them because it makes it look like they sold all these cars. Even though they're sitting at the dealership, Ford doesn't own them anymore. The dealership borrowed money from a bank to own them. That's crazy, right? Just craziness. D. Wynn says, starting my car kills the battery. I got an '06 Acura TL. My car kills the battery instantly when I start the car. I change the alternator, replace the battery twice, check for blown fuses. I charge the battery with a 10 for a week, stick it in the car, start it, and the battery dies right away. What should I be looking for? Okay, numero uno, check the starter. A shorted out starter will do exactly that. You turn it on, it gets so much power, it shorts out the battery. You check for blown fuses and stuff. You also want to check all the wiring, from the battery wiring to the ignition switch, and the ignition switch through everything to the starter. Because if you got a dead short in that wiring, when you turn that key, it's going to send power to a dead short, and it'd be just like you getting two battery cables, hooking them up to a battery, and then getting the other two ends and clicking them together. They'd spark and go mental. Well, a short does the same kind of things. Now, most of the time on those, it just means you need a new starter motor. Starters generally don't last that long anyway, so you probably just need a starter motor. Any mechanic can check it. We got a machine. We just put it on. We see what the draw is. And if the draw is too heavy, you know the starter's bad. Other than that, like I said, it could be the wiring going through. Even a bad ignition switch could theoretically short it out. But on those things, it's almost always just a worn out starter motor. Eric Schweitzer says, I got a screeching car window. I've got a driver's side electric window that screeches every time I roll it up. I tried spraying lubricant, but it doesn't really work. Do you have any idea how I can fix it? Okay, you want to use only spray silicone in a can. because it's waterproof. And what you do first is roll the window down. And then the front and the back of the window has the rubber valleys that the window slides up and down. Spray both sides liberally so they get all silicone. Roll it up, roll it down again, do it again. Do that 2 or 3 times. Normally, that's going to get rid of it because it's the window on old rubber screeching. That will almost always fix it. Spray silicone works great on rubber. Now, if it still screeches when you roll it up, then you're probably going to need a new window regulator motor assembly. Eventually, those can wear out. The pivot points can wear, and they'll screech because instead of the window regulator metal rolling on nice little bearings, the bearings are worn out, and then it's bare metal and it screeches. Then you'd have to replace the window regulator and the motor assembly, and then it would stop screeching. Most of the time, they'll spray silicone the way I said to do. It's going to fix it. JGR 1984 says, I accidentally left the gas cap open. I was running out of gas in the middle of Ohio. I saw there was a gas station 4 miles away. I got close, so I filled up the fuel tank, and I forgot to put the cap back on. Car runs fine, no check engine light. Could I cause any damage to the car? 2023 Chrysler Pacifica minivan. Not that short period of time. If you do it for weeks and weeks and weeks, you're going to get too much water vapor inside. When we had pure gasoline, it was a bigger deal because if the water got inside there, the water and the gasoline really don't mix, and then you'd get a bunch of water in your gas tank and create problems. This is one advantage of modern ethanol-added cars. If you don't know it, you see on the pump, may contain 10% ethanol. That means it does contain 10% ethanol. Ethanol is alcohol. So if you do get a little bit of water in your car these days, guess what? The ethanol that's in the gasoline already will absorb that little bit of water. So people no longer have the problem they used to have. When I was a younger mechanic, all the time in the winter, we'd have cars, the fuel lines would freeze up and stuff because water got in there and froze up, and we'd have to put in anti-freeze treatment in a little bottle, which is basically ethanol, right? But now you got 10% ethanol, so it's not a problem we have anymore. So no, you really don't have to worry about anything. 1, 2, 3, I'm Cole says, I got a 2018 Lexus GX460. Only when I accelerate hard, it makes a sucking noise. Sounds like it's coming from the air intake. It runs fine. No check engine light. I tighten the clamps around the air intake and everything, but to no avail. What do you think I should do? Turn the radio up so you don't hear it. All right, just go out and buy a PCV valve. When the PCV valves go bad, they'll suck too much air and they'll make a sucking noise. Very simple fix, right? Now, if it isn't that, replace the air filter. If the air filter gets clogged, it puts too much stress, and it'll make a noise. Could be just a dirty air filter, right? And if it's not that, take off the air intake hose, get some throttle spray cleaner, and clean the throttle. Because as they age, a lot of times the throttles can get a buildup of carbon, and of course it'll make noise because it's taking up space, and instead of the air going smoothly, it hits the carbon and can start making a noise. My bet would be more that you either got a dirty air filter or you got a bad PCV valve. So check those. Those are both real easy things to do yourself, you know. Those are well-made cars. They generally go perfectly fine. Now, I'm assuming you're the original owner, but let's say you're second owner and somebody put a cold air intake. It's your cold air intake. They'll make noise like that, in which case, take the cold air intake, throw it away, go to a junkyard and buy a used factory intake system and put it back on the way that it was designed in the first place. Well, UPS is cutting 12,000 jobs. They're saying there's a softer demand and higher costs. Last year, UPS had a deal going with the Teamsters, and no Teamster jobs are going to be affected by these cuts. It's other people that are losing their jobs. It's always a trickle-down thing, you know. If they can't fire one person, they'll find a way to fire somebody else. Now, they cut 12,000 jobs because they said, oh, well, we're trying to cut $1 billion in costs in our company, right? And this is what the insanity that brought it about. Turns out they gave out their fourth quarter earnings, right? And it was lower than expected. So now they figure, oh, we got to cut costs, right? Well, it wasn't that lower. The ubiquitous Wall Street, right? Wall Street is just a street. They just use that as an excuse for analysts to say what they think they're going to get. Wall Street expected $25.43 billion in revenue. Okay? Instead, they only got $24.92 billion. It isn't that big of a difference. Well, they're just using that as an excuse to fire people. I'd love to see where these figures actually come from. Knowing how corporations work, they lie about just everything, right? And then when they come up with figures, if they want to make it look bad, they'll make them a little bit lower so they can start saying, well, we got to fire people now. Or when people see that the stock isn't being invested in enough, then they go the opposite direction and say that they made made even more profit, right? I'd love to know where these actual figures come from. I wouldn't believe any of them. It's like people that invest in the stock market. Those guys lie like dogs, telling you what's going on, and then later you find out it was all lies and your stock investment went down the toilet. Read the fine print, you'll see. They're basically saying all this stuff may be a complete lie, right? But the big headlines say, oh, they made $25 billion now, blah, 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 right? You can't believe any of them. They're using this as an excuse to lay off more workers. You can't believe any of these figures anymore. And then in the reality, you find out that most of it's a line of horse manure, and they're just using the figures for their own ends. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.